Good morning, selamat pagi, warm greetings from Penang, Malaysia. Thank you for joining us for our third keynote session of PELTA's 10th International English Language Teaching Conference. I'm Kwek Tien Wei, the moderator for this session, and I'm glad to welcome all of you to this keynote session. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Associate Professor Dr. Jonathan Newton. Professor, let me have the pleasure to introduce you to our viewers today. Dr. Jonathan Newton is the Associate Professor and Program Director for the Masters in TESOL or Applied Linguistics at Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. He has rich experiences in language teacher education, where he has worked alongside teachers to better understand classroom teaching and learning, especially in relation to task-based language teaching listening and speaking, teaching vocabulary, and teaching for intercultural capabilities. We are very honored to have Dr. Professor Jonathan Newton with us here today, and he'll be sharing with us his views about humanizing language teaching in the digital world. Over to you, Professor. We're all ears.
Many thanks, and good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, depending on what part of the world you are in right now. If you're in Malaysia, I guess you're just rapidly finishing your breakfast, if you've got that far in the morning. Over here in New Zealand, it's 4 minutes past 2, and I'm looking forward to an afternoon of your talks once I've got through mine. So I've got half an hour to deal with this trivial topic of humanizing language teaching in the digital world. My goodness, I certainly pick some challenges, don't I? So I wanted to address this challenge because of my own experience, as has been, I'm sure, the experience of many of you, of the challenges of maintaining my identity as a teacher, as teaching has shifted very rapidly into the digital domain. It's kind of ironic, it occurs to me, as I look at the title of this talk, Humanizing Language Teaching, and here I am, physically removed from you, visually removed from you. I'm in my office by myself in New Zealand. All I can see is my screen with my slide. I can't see any of you. I can't even see my face. I don't know what you can see. I hope I'm still on the screen. I hope you can hear me, but I don't get any visual cues from you. So, there's a kind of an irony that I'm facing right here. Some of the challenges we have in humanizing teaching, humanizing engagement in the classroom. What does it mean to humanize language teaching? And just as I introduce the talk for the next few minutes, if you've got any thoughts or practical ways in which you've humanized your teaching, why don't you drop them into the chat line, and with any luck, I'll be able to see them with any luck. And then I will explore what I think are some options for humanizing language teaching. Let me acknowledge to start with that I'm going to draw on the research of a number of my PhD students. I've got a small, not so small group. I've got 5 PhD students at the moment currently doing, I've got other students as well, but these 5 are focusing on task-based language teaching. And we have a task-based language teaching special interest group. And these teachers are all focused on how teachers are making sense of textbooks in the classroom. Where there are tasks or task-like activities, what are they doing with them? So they're really getting into the interface in the classroom between the curriculum, the textbook, and teacher action, which seems to be an interface where there's a lot of potential for humanizing, or for that matter, dehumanizing. And just to anticipate the main points of what I'm trying to say here, busy lives, bureaucracy, resource limitations, small classrooms, curriculum pressures, these are always forces that can dehumanize what we do as language teachers, whether in the physical world or the virtual world. I had an email from a student I taught many years ago who's now teaching in Malaysia, and she said teachers are still piled with clerical work, extremely micromanaged by school administration, told to send live location via telegram of our whereabouts for 8 hours every day. We're told to send lots of graphs and figures on a weekly basis on the attendance of the students, regardless of whether they have or do not have good devices. the stable internet, etc. So, teaching online has undoubtedly added pressures, but you can see that some of those things she's talking about are intrinsic to the culture of education in a particular context, and so they remain with us. Um, so I think there are certainly threats that the digital world throws up for teachers and for maintaining our human identity and humanizing processes. But there are also opportunities. I did a talk at the conference, an ICON conference in 2019, and I talked about the choice we have in the future of pirouetting, spinning on one foot until we get back to normal, or pivoting, turning and moving forward. And a comment from a teacher educator in Malaysia at the time sort of captures this. She said that some teachers and teacher educators are simply waiting to go back to the classroom so they can pick up their old ways. And yet, as educators, it's our responsibility, I think, to model and foster in our learners transferable, future-ready skills. We have to be able to model those ourselves. It's our responsibility. If we don't, I think we've failed our learners. And there are some spectacular opportunities in the digital domain and virtual spaces that aren't available in the classroom, as much as there are many challenges and problems and risks. And so I'm going to explore that tension between the affordances or opportunities and the risks. I'm mindful, thinking back, Tamash, to your presentation, if you're here today, I love the way that you're a perfect example of humanizing an experience, because you minimized the slides and you maximized yourself as a communicator talking to us. And I wish I could model that. I've probably got too many slides. I'm always bedeviled by that particular choice, but I have worked hard to reduce them. What does it mean to humanize language? I think it means to consider how we view language, how we teach, what we teach, how we facilitate learning, and how we do research. And I'm foolish enough to try and to put into this presentation some comments or some thoughts on each of those things. Let me just start briefly with Michael Fullan's notion of the 6 C's of education. Alan brought this up in the second keynote yesterday, and I've talked about these in the past in presentations I've given in Malaysia. And I've always been focused on the 6 C's: character, citizenship, communication, etc. And you know what I just noticed recently? That 21st century skills for student and society. Well-being. You see well-being in capital letters there. It's so easy to get caught up in these big new waves, and I know that the deep learning paradigm was kind of influential a few years ago, Fullan and Langworthy and Scott. And to forget that underlying this model in Michael Fullan's work is a deep commitment to well-being, to student well-being and social well-being. And that speaks to the heart of what we're talking about here with humanizing language teaching. All right, I'm going to start with humanizing language. Language is at the heart of what we do. Let me go back in time to the evolution of language. What is it in its intrinsic nature? Well, pre-linguistic forms of communication, somewhat speculatively, were holistic. They involved our whole lives. They were manipulative. They allowed us to do things with the world and in the world. They were multimodal. So they involved movement and as well as visual cues. And they were musical. So tonality came before words. Mimetic. They involved mimicking, copying each other. And they were born out of a shared pleasure of sound and rhythm. All of these are deeply baked into the nature of communication. There are 2 views on the evolutionary roots of human language. Well, there are more than 2 actually, but there are 2 that are of relevance to us here. The first is that language evolved to facilitate emotional tuning and collaboration in groups. That is to say, Language evolved as humans moved into small groups and family groups, of course, and expanded into slightly larger groups collaboratively, more likely to succeed in hunting animals, catching animals, if they were collaborating with other groups. And of course, language facilitated that collaboration. Those groups had a greater likelihood of surviving, and therefore language was sustained and replicated through that process. Another view of the evolutionary roots of language is that it actually emerged out of storytelling. Both language and the brain are adapted to storytelling. And of course, we know that children love stories. Stories are magic. They create other worlds and emotions and make everyday life seem incredible. They encourage in us empathy and understanding of others. I'm just learning French as a beginner at the moment on Duolingo. And, I'm doing all these translation exercises. But you know what I love? At a certain point in Duolingo, when you get through a certain number of exercises, you get a story opens up and you can read the story. And there's been one I've been enjoying lately about a boy who says to his dad, "Dad, we need more money. I've got to get to work. I've got to go to work." "Why, son?" Because we need more money." "Why?" "Because we need a bigger house." "But our house is the right size." "No, we need a bigger car." "Why, son?" "Our car's too small." "Why, son?" So lots of repetition. "Because of the baby." And the father says, "What baby?" And the son says, "Mum's having a baby." "Oh," and the dad's shocked. "Oh my gosh, yes, we do need a new house and a new car." So a lovely little kind of simple dialogue for just a beginner level story. And I go back to those stories and enjoy them time and time again. Storytelling, at least in my brain, kind of appeals to me as a way to engage with language. And I think that's probably true of most of us. And yet it's rarely seen once we get out of primary school. Just one more thing about the nature of language in terms of, this theme of humanizing our understanding of language, that children are highly tuned to some key features of language. One is to prosody. You can take the words away, the lexical items, and you can look at the amount of information conveyed by rhythm, intonation, tone, and tempo. And of course, they're highly tuned to gaze and to posture and movement and touch and gesture. And language is deeply embedded in its socio-emotional context. It conveys attitudes towards the world and towards others. So all of these aspects of language are deeply human. And the extent to which we can recognize them and find ways to bring them to life in our face-to-face classes or in our virtual environments is really important. All right, that's just laying a very brief foundation on our views of language as a way of thinking about humanizing what we do as language teachers. Second, humanizing teaching. And here I'm going to draw on the work of my PhD students. Hao Da, who's just finishing her PhD in the next couple of weeks, looked at how three teachers in a university in Vietnam were dealing with the textbook, teaching from the textbook. And Alan, this might be something that interests you. They were using new cutting-edge elementary. Now, you probably can't see the details here, but what Hao has done is observe one teacher, in this case, Min, and looked at what she taught and what she didn't teach from the textbook. So when it came to the first activity of a bunch of words, the students were, the textbook says match the words with the pictures, while the teacher explained and defined every word and translated every word. Exercise 2, work in pairs. Exercise 3, talk with other students about things. The teacher did all of those as whole class activities. And activity 4, which was to read a text and and find the best topic sentences for each paragraph, the teacher translated the text and did it with the whole class again. So you can see here, the teachers are making interesting choices to humanize or dehumanize the textbook. Let me just take a broader review of what Min did based on Hao's analysis. So if we look at the textbook, we see across 39 activities, 9 and 18, so that's 27, were pre-communicative and 12 were communicative in some way. Hao retained a lot of the non-communicative or pre-communicative activities. She didn't retain any of the communicative activities. She adapted a number of activities, and every adaptation reduced its communicativeness. She added 12 more non-communicative activities, and she removed a bunch of activities here. In effect, what she did is she doubled the amount of pre-communicative work, and she reduced to less than a third the amount of communicative opportunities in the classroom. Now, what's interesting about Hao's work is that Hao then worked with these teachers in a participatory action research project, talking them through the principles behind the textbook, which they actually had no idea about. They were simply teaching the way they'd been taught, and then observed the teachers as they shifted and began to, in my terms, humanize their teaching by engaging with the opportunities and affordances in the textbook more fully. But it needed that sitting around and exploring the textbook in some detail with an expert's guidance to really move the teachers on. Now, this is Virginia Samuda, who's very well known for her work in task-based language teaching. And she points out that, of course, tasks provide opportunities for language processing, but it is teachers who guide learners towards the types of processing that support L2 development. In other words, the teachers mediate learning opportunities. The teachers mediate opportunities to humanize or dehumanize what goes on in the classroom. You know, the gap between a textbook and the lively action in a classroom is a gap which is filled by the teacher. All right, so we've looked at humanizing language, humanizing teaching, and now the other side of humanizing teaching is humanizing learning. I'm going to draw on another of my PhD students' work. This is Yoshi Nishikawa. She is teaching, her research is looking at teaching a beginner-level Japanese language class at university and introducing a task-based approach, pretty challenging. Here's a standard activity in the textbook. I haven't got time to go through the detail. Essentially, the students just repeat the phrases here, practicing the phrases, putting them into sentences. Mary's good at tennis. She's poor at cooking. She's poor at making sushi. She's good at eating with chopsticks, etc., etc. There's no meaning focus. There's no gap for the learners to engage with. They're both looking at the same information. They don't have to actually draw on any of their own resources. They're simply repeating like parrots what's on the page, and there's no outcome beyond accurately presenting these phrases. So what Yoshi-san did is she developed an alternative lesson, and this is just lovely, where she put the learners in pairs, incidentally on Zoom, and she one of the members of each pair was a careers advisor, and the other member was seeking information about what career they could take. And so the career advisor asked questions in Japanese. Do you like working outdoors? Yes, I do. Okay. Do you like speaking Japanese? No, I don't. Do you like driving? Yes, I do. Well, then you can be a taxi driver, and so on. So this fascinating little activity, which the learners had to do in Japanese in a beginner classroom. A strong focus on meaning, perhaps because we don't know where the person who's the advisee doesn't know what job they're going to be advised of. And of course, the learners have to draw on a lot of their own resources to make this activity work properly. And there's an outcome which they can then share and talk about and laugh about. Here's what Yoshi-san said about her tutorials as part of her reflective process. I used to tell my students that tutorials are the place for them to make plenty of mistakes, so they will not make mistakes in real life when they have a chance to speak with native speakers. Does that make sense to you? And here's what the realization she came to through bringing tasks into her beginner level classroom. I have a totally different view now. Language use is happening right here, now. They use the language with their classmates and teachers, not as a learner, but as a language user in real communicative events. Now, this for Yoshi-san was an epiphany. This was an insight. and a kind of deep shift in her thinking about what she was doing in the classroom and how she was treating learners. And you can see here, this is a deep shift to a humanizing perspective, that this language and language, the learners are users, they're doing things with language which are real and interesting and engaging. Let me move on to talk about Yoshi-san's experience of Zoom breakout rooms, which is where our the digital part of this talk is relevant. She talks about visiting Zoom breakout rooms, and she said, when I visited another room or group, student C was asking, have you watched Ghibli movies in Japanese? And student D was excitedly raised both her hands and saying, I have in Japanese. And student D quickly went to look for something, disappeared off the screen, and came back with her Totoro toy. There's a movie character from these. So another student took a step back and said, which movie do you like? And then they talked about the movies in Japanese. And another student went off somewhere and came back with a smaller Totoro soft toy. Here's what Yoshi said about this experience. I've already covered part of that, isn't it? What am I going to do? Yeah. It started with a basic conversation, but the Zoom room became a space where all had a good laugh and willingly shared what they love and common interests. Talking about personal experience led to topics they were interested in. They expressed joy in finding common stuff, even better in Zoom. And I was intrigued there, the way that the students actually had an opportunity to disappear off screen and bring something to the room. And I could see the potential for that to be quite a fun game. A couple more quick examples that I've shown before in presentations. This is from another of my PhD students from some years ago now, who explored how teachers were engaging with the textbook in Vietnamese high schools. And here's an activity where the learners had to work together to decide where to place people on a ferry. And the teacher said, actually, this is boring. I've used this task before. The students weren't interested, not much talk. Students use Vietnamese, and they just tried to complete the task as quickly as possible. But if given a chance to talk freely about what they're going to do, students will search for words more. They'll talk more, talk better, and it will be more enjoyable. I guess that sounds pretty obvious, doesn't it? But this is actually quite profound because, again, it's an example of that humanizing of language teaching. The awareness that this teacher had over years as quite an experienced teacher, that certain activities just weren't going to engage learners because they were steps removed from their real lives. But when these learners were given something that they wanted to talk about, that really lifted the opportunities to engage with English. And another one I've shown before, which I just still love, in a primary school in Vietnam, where one of my PhD students was helping teachers move towards more task-based teaching, which is completely new to the teachers and completely new to the students. In this case, the kids had done an information gap activity about timetables, and at the end, they continued talking in English, even though they were grade 4 low proficiency, very low level students. When the teachers gave the students an input-based task where instead of having to just drill and repeat after the teacher, they had to listen to the dialogue and they had to fill out a little diagram. This is what a teacher said. Oh, this is a teacher who previously had said, I just feel like I'm telling the students to say what I want them to say, like robots. And here's what she said. Students got more curious and more excited. Again, I think an example of how tasks, well-designed communicative tasks, task-based language teaching humanizes language teaching potentially. One more quick example here. I think part of all this, an important part which is often forgotten, is getting learners to engage with and own this linguistic proficiency in another language that they're developing. And this comes from an article by Galante in which I forgot what it's called. It's got a delightful title, something like, the moment I realized I was plurilingual. The students have been learning these languages as if they were outside of themselves. But we really want our students to have a sense that this language belongs to me. Remember those two kids in the primary school classroom? You know, language belonged to them at the end of the task because they had had to invest. If we give our learners opportunities to invest in real language use, the language becomes something they identify with and own. And in this article, students were asked to draw a diagram about their plurilingual selves and how they identified with their different languages. And of course, in Malaysia, for example, many of your learners are at least trilingual. Okay, the last part of the talk, with a few minutes to go, humanizing teacher research. So we've talked about humanizing language, humanizing teaching, humanizing learning. Oh, humanizing teacher research. I think there's a tendency sometimes to think of the word research in terms of large-scale quantitative studies where you pre-test and post-test and you measure things. That certainly has a very important place. But I want to emphasize, and I think in our teacher education programs, and those of you who are working in IPBKs, in the teacher institutes in Malaysia and universities working with teachers, I think it's really important that teachers have an opportunity to have their voices heard and to explore their voices and to explore their contexts from a much more qualitative perspective through, for example, case studies, ethnographies, reflective practice, which Tamas talked about, autoethnography, participatory action research, and narrative-based accounts. And I want to just give you one example and then I'll wrap up. So this is from another of my PhD students, Fenty Siregar from Indonesia. So she undertook an autoethnography as part of her PhD, exploring the place of culture in her language teaching. Now, in autoethnography, autobiography is when you write your biography. So an autoethnography is when you write you research yourself and your own practice. It's a form of qualitative research. It relies on self-reflection and writing to explore anecdotal and personal experience and connect these autobiographical stories to a wider political, cultural, social, educational context. You notice, you might have heard me use the word anecdotal, and of course, in more traditional positivist accounts of research, the anecdotal is taboo. You can't rely on that. We're not saying you rely on it, but it is valued here as part of the process of developing an understanding of what goes on. So she began by identifying a puzzle, which in her case was, how do I make sense of culture in my classroom? Because we seem to have a very traditional approach, and I want to develop an intercultural approach. So she planned some interventions, she acted them out, she introduced them in the classroom, observed what happened, reflected, went back to step 2 and went through the cycle over a full trimester. And throughout this process, she was writing and reflecting, and that writing and reflecting became the PhD. One of the things that Fenty explored through this process was the somewhat taboo topic of religion, of the different religions in the classroom and how those religious perspectives framed their understanding of culture and what could and couldn't be talked about. She also saw through this process a shift from thinking about culture in terms of let's learn about native speaker cultures, Americans, Australians, whatever. Let's learn about ourselves, let's reflect on ourselves and how culture shapes the way we see the world. So that was another insight that came out of her PhD. What really matters in this humanized, if you like, humanizing approach to teacher research? Well, what really matters is context. In quantitative research, context is squeezed out. You have to eliminate or reduce the effect of context. In this kind of research, actually, that's everything. Context is, you're describing how context shapes what you do. Complexity, you acknowledge the complexity rather than reduce it. You foreground exploring and discovering through the process of teaching and reflecting on teaching. Your story matters. Your subjectivities, how you think and feel, matter. This seems to me to be very liberating. And throughout the process of teacher research, there's this reflexive, ongoing engagement with your subjectivities, reflecting on them, and then drawing from them. You might say, well, what's the use of these kind of stories? They, of course, can't be generalized. You can't say, well, this is my experience, therefore other teachers have the same experience. But this kind of rich description provides teachers with an insight into a context that they can then choose to say, yeah, this really makes sense to me too. And so there's a transferability, if not a generalizability, from these really rich stories that teachers can tell. And as I said, a lot of my PhD students are doing this in their research. A quick bit of promotion here. I'm co-editing a book with colleagues in Sarawak on access and equity in TESOL, facing the challenges of remote teaching. We've passed the deadline for chapter submissions, but if any of you, the last minute, think you've got something you'd really like to contribute, get in touch. I'm going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, so get in touch with me if you're interested in, you've got a story to tell about access and equity facing the challenge of remote teaching. All right, my final thoughts. So I've talked with you, I've talked through with you 4 dimensions of humanizing language teaching: humanizing language, humanizing teaching, humanizing learning, and humanizing teacher research. My final thoughts. The humanizing potential of language learning is powerful. It's a powerful, as I've argued, it's a very powerful aspect of language itself, but it's also fragile. And it's fragile whether we are in virtual or physical spaces. And I think that has to be acknowledged. It's not as if the virtual has suddenly dehumanized our language teaching or threatened to dehumanize it. Teachers as mediators of learning need to reclaim and revalue their role as humanizers of the learning experience. And when I say reclaim and revalue, this means to find ways to engage with the human dimensions of language teaching in the virtual domain. And also, and this is really important, as we return to more face-to-face teaching, to rethink, rather than go back to old ways, how we humanize the learning experience. There's nothing magical about tech tools. Real magic lies in the hearts and minds of teachers, using digital tools to introduce students to new individuals, ideas, and opportunities. Real magic lies in the hearts and minds of teachers who are using digital tools to introduce students to new individuals, ideas, and opportunities. I know that sounds rather Pollyannish, and there's plenty of deep struggles that we've all experienced in the digital world. But let's hold out some hope for also ways that we can enrich experiences through digital learning as well. And the final point I've made is that qualitative research methods allow teachers' voices to be heard and to play a role in shaping and humanizing our pedagogic future. And those of you who do research or supervise research in teacher education, or are teachers and work together with other teachers and have some opportunities to research, I'd really encourage you to think about the teacher's voice and the learner's voices, the teacher's voices and the learner's voices as the heart of a research project. Getting together, doing participatory action research, engaging with the complexities and frustrations and joys and challenges and victories and achievements in your context, because those are the stories, it seems to me, that enrich our understanding of language teaching in very deep and important ways. I think I've talked enough. I haven't seen any, my technology here has failed me, and I haven't seen any comments that may or may not be flying by, but I think I have finished there. So let me just acknowledge these 5 PhD students, stars, whose work I've drawn on: Hao Dao, Trung Bui, Bao Trung, Tin Wan, and Yoshi Nishikawa, and Fenty Surika. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jonathan. It is indeed very important that we build and strengthen connectedness and engagement and a learning and supportive community among teachers and between teachers and also their learners. I can recall vividly moments I myself had over the past 18 months. We certainly are not facing the problems alone, and it is really important for us to reach out to one another. Your speech just now has just blown me away, Professor. And yes, I am looking forward to more tutorial moments in my classroom, be it physical or virtual. Okay, so now let's have the Q&A session. I think questions are coming in because the audience are taking the time to digest the talk, the input.
Funny, Tamas, your comment. Actually, this, I don't know if you've come across Earl Stevick's work. This is a book, Memory, Meaning, and Method, which was deeply rooted in a caring, sharing approach to language teaching, and it is circa 1976, but still very profound. It's a theme that goes way back in language teaching, with the counseling learning approach. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that particular method, counseling learning, which very much saw language classrooms, particularly in the American context, where they're working with a lot of refugees, involved deep engagement with the person, and the language learning as a deeply personal experience.
Okay, we have a question from Richard Quay. As we are returning to physical classrooms, what are some key takeaways for educators from lessons learned during the pandemic, which we should adopt into our current and future curriculum?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think the danger, as I said at the beginning of the talk, is that teachers simply return to the old ways. So how have we pivoted? I use that metaphor at the beginning. Are we still pirouetting on the same spot, or have we pivoted to the future? And that taps into the theme of this conference. Richard, all I'm doing is restating your question at the moment. It's a really big question. The danger is that the more things change, the more they stay the same, and the fundamentals don't shift. I think that's a question that teachers have to ask themselves. What have I learned from stepping away from the classroom that I can bring back into the classroom? What did I miss? What did I take for granted? And I think that's probably where I will answer this question. What did I take for granted in the face-to-face classroom that I suddenly felt was a great loss when I went to the virtual classroom? Now, when I go back to the classroom, let me not take that for granted anymore. Let me not take for granted that I have got 30, 40, 20 live individuals with lives and emotions and brains in front of me. And let me make the most of that context. So I think that's my answer there. What about teachers as researchers inside their own classroom? I'm just responding to multi. Yep. So yes, thank you for that question. So autoethnography really picks up and provides opportunities for teachers to be ethnographers of their own classrooms and their own experience of the classroom. And can I just emphasize that it's not just always looking out? I think the point about autoethnography, and Tamas, this is the point you made, is that reflection and reflexivity involves looking in. So it's your life, not only the life of the classroom, but your life as a teacher in the classroom.
Okay, we have another question by Jiaying Ho. Thanks, Professor. One question: should students start to enjoy meaningful talking in class, or would you stop them so as to complete planned tasks at hand, or let them talk to their heart's content? I guess it's a struggle that a lot of educators are facing.
Well, if the task is engaging enough, you won't have the problem. And if it's structured well enough, not structured so it squeezes the life out of it, but so that the students have got a time frame, they've got roles, they've got a challenge, they've got an objective. So my focus would be on making the task rich enough that you are going to engage them.
All right. So I'm also seeing from the comments, we received thanks from, people who asked questions just now. So I guess you have answered the question. Do we have time for another more question, or should I wrap it up? Let's see. Perhaps we have time for one more question, or can I throw in my question?
I would love you to.
Okay, so I'll put at the chat so it can be shown as a banner. I posted on YouTube chat. So my question is, oh, there's so many more questions coming in suddenly.
Yeah.
So
we're 2 minutes. We're 2 minutes away from wrapping up, aren't we?
Yep. Okay.
Tian-Wei, do you want to just talk about your question a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My question is, what would be your advice to someone who has just been out in the field and then just got hit by the pandemic and is struggling on both ends of digital skills and also pedagogical experiences? Because I feel that a lot of new teachers, people expect that because they're younger and just out in the field, they are naturally good in digital skills. And that's not always the case. Yeah.
It's a great question. It's a little bit broad in scope for me. I mean, what would be your advice to someone who's just been out in the field? It's got a lot to it.
Going back to humanizing.
They're a new teacher, and suddenly they are having to teach in a new modality without a lot of pedagogic experience. Wow. Yeah. I'm going to have to pass on that one. It's a biggie. I don't have any ideas jumping out at me there. Can I just jump on to Michelle?
Yeah.
Apart from sharing stories, what else can we do to humanize? If anybody else, by the way, has an answer to Tian-Wei, my brain is starting to sort of slow down a little bit. So throw your answers in there.
I think, I think the answer is slightly in your slide. It's just that we have a lot of deep thinking again in order to come up with, answering that. Yeah. So let's go on to Michelle's question.
Yeah, let me just, before I get to Michelle's question, it's a point I've made in other talks. I like the idea of falling forward. It's a metaphor I encourage with my, novice teachers. Look, you're going to try things out that are not going to work. That's called falling forward. It's not a mistake. It's falling forward. I've realized that there's something I need to improve, so I'll try it again, and I'll try it a different way. In other words, don't let your struggles be seen as failures. They're learning experiences which take you on. And I think novice teachers have to be prepared for a lot of falling forward. I still do too.
Oh, I think we're running out of time. So such an informative and fruitful session from you, Dr. Associate Professor Jonathan Newton. And I'm afraid that we're really, really running short of time for questions for now, as panel 2 for featured speakers talk is coming up next. Once again, we thank Professor Jonathan Newton for his wonderful and really close to heart sharing with us today. Thank you to the audience for participating actively in this session. Stay tuned for our next session. And with that, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our featured speaker panel 2. The topic is Navigating Challenges of the Pandemic. We have 4 wonderful speakers today. I will introduce the 4 of them very briefly before we let the first panelist take the floor. So first we have Samuel Isaiah from Malaysia, then Esther from Indonesia, Miriam Esther Puente Rodriguez from Mexico, last but not least, Dr. Konwipa Ponhon from Thailand. Let's move on to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Samuel Isaiah. He is a passionate and driven educator and leader who strives to bridge the gap between theory and practice, challenging the status quo and leading collaborative changes. He is best known for his love for his indigenous students, and he is also an award-winning changemaker who was named as the top 10 finalists of the prestigious Global Teacher Prize 2020. The program director at Pemimpin GSL, where he aspires to impact more schools nationwide. His topic is teachers and leaders and social innovators. I pass the mic to Sam.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Samuel Isaiah, and it is an absolute pleasure to be sharing with you at the 10th International English Language Teaching Conference 2021, organized by the Penang English Language Learning and Teaching Association, PELTA. Now, the theme of this conference, Developing Future Skills in English Language Teaching, is definitely timely. The emphasis of the theme could be defined in a way that teachers need to develop new skills to address drastic changes in our education system due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, it also focuses on long ignored principles and skills that we need to bring up again. Oftentimes, we may reason that teachers who are change makers and teachers who have affected the lives of many in their school practice extravagant and grandiose ideas to solve problems faced by their students and the communities that they teach in. However, this session will dive into what I believe matters most in bringing forth change. And they are the role of teachers in the effectiveness of their practice, promoting values of diversity and inclusion, and lastly, the importance and the value of building alliances. These are the 3 key points of my sharing today, which is entitled Teachers as Leaders and Social Innovators in Navigating the Challenges of the Pandemic. As a teacher who has worked closely with underprivileged communities and youth, and as a teacher trainer who has partnered with teachers and academics nationwide, I will actively draw from my experience and actively revisit what I have learned from and with all these amazing individuals and amazing teachers that I have come across. Let us first look at the role of teachers in defining the effectiveness of their practice. You see, what an educator believes about his or her purpose is in an in-person or virtual classroom is the foundations of leading changes, what their principles are. Teachers who are leaders and teachers who are innovators realize this. They realize that they are not just givers of information. They are not just givers of information, but they play a crucial role in co-constructing knowledge with their students. And at the same time, they are responsible for providing an engaging and an empowering learning experience. These teachers also know that the learning experience in the classroom must provide opportunities after opportunities for students to take charge of their learning, for students to engage and take risk, and for students to feel safe in an environment that encourages them to fail, to laugh about that failure, and try again. So what does this imply? This implies that the design of teaching and learning in an interactive learner-centered way that enables exploratory, action-oriented, and transformative learning is very important. And this is the role of teachers. And here is and where we must define the effectiveness of our practice. Therefore, I would like to encourage educators to rethink their role. Please rethink your role and how you view and define the effectiveness of your practice, not just from the perspective of giving them the information, giving your students this perspective. The information. So I would like to encourage you to apply this perspective of co-constructing knowledge with your students, of giving them opportunities to take charge, to fail, to try, to be interactive, to be action-oriented, and apply this perspective to how you ensure an explicit and progressive learning standards in the curriculum that you are delivering. Apply this perspective to how you include digital and blended learning options. Apply this perspective in how you envision the learning environment in your classroom, not just to inspire your students, but also to continually inspire yourself. Now, my second point would be diversity and inclusion. I've learned a lot about this when I was teaching my indigenous students for almost 10 years. Now, in promoting the values of diversity and inclusion, the simplest form of it must first exist in the classroom, period. And how we do this is by actively means frequent, actively means purposefully including our students in our decision making in the classroom of what we want to teach them. Leaders, innovators, and change makers in schools often make the voice and the relationship they have built with their students as their prized asset. For me personally, I could have never done it without that relationship, without including my students in my decision making, in my classroom, in my principles, in what I ever did with my students. Why? Because inclusivity can address inequalities. And when the classroom and when school itself is more inclusive and is more engaging, all students, regardless of their background, will have equal opportunities to learn in ways that are more personalized and diverse. This will encourage them to make learning meaningful to them, to their culture, to their community, to their livelihoods, and to their needs. However, when we listen to our students, diversifying implies that we need to act on the input that we receive. Listening is also about acting it out, and teachers who are leaders and innovators encourage their students to explore various concepts and disciplines that address problems that they can relate to, locally and also globally. And the integration, when I listen to my students, when I listen to what they wanted to do, I found that the integration of multiple disciplines allowed them to connect new knowledge and have a deeper understanding to real life experiences. Now, this culture of diversifying, of inclusivity, of inclusion, when scaffolded and when provided with sufficient support, is an impetus for teachers and schools to move beyond trickle-down approaches to an organic bottom-up perspective. Nonetheless, these aspirations will not be as successful without providing teachers with continuous support and, crucially, autonomy. I thrived on autonomy. A lot of school leaders, a lot of amazing, innovative leaders in school thrive on this autonomy, but most of the time was the autonomy that we took for ourselves. So we need to provide this autonomy to teachers, because we cannot expect every teacher to be a rebel and break boundaries out of their own sheer will and meet the needs of the students and the community without support, without autonomy, and without trust. Last but not least, teachers who are leaders and innovators understand and appreciate the value of building and sustaining alliances. After 3 years of teaching, and after in my first 3 years of teaching, and after a series of failures after failures, I realized that I could not possibly do it alone. There was always going to be a limit to what I can achieve, to what I can deliver to my students. Therefore, teachers who are leaders and social innovators rely on networks and collaborative communities to increase the effectiveness of their interventions, to increase their own capabilities and the value that they deliver to their students, and most importantly, to promote sustainability. What I first did was commune with the parents of my students. I built that relationship and that alliance with them. I invited them to my classroom open days very frequently. I negotiated and consulted them way before the launch of any programs. I made them central in my decision making. I ensured that they had a crucial role to play in what I was doing. Together, we ensured that both of our voices matter. Indigenous, Orang Asli, Felda, Kampung, urban schools, underprivileged, privileged schools, whatever it is, when we come together, we can make it work. And throughout the years, the alliance became strong and strong and stronger. It grew stronger and stronger. And what we saw, that the interventions that we did, the interventions that we carried out, it was ours. It was not Samuel's. It was not just solely the students. It was not solely that belonged to the community. It belonged to us. It was done with them and not for them. Building alliances with the community not only meant that we were doing it together, it also meant there were things in areas that I was not good at. They came in. They provided me with the expertise. Do not underestimate the underprivileged parents. Do not underestimate the power of collaboration. They always have something to bring to the table. Use it together with them. Another way that we can build alliances is to network with teachers. Build network with teachers who share similar experiences, who share similar aspirations with you. This will provide the opportunity to share expertise, to share practices, to share networks, to share resources, and to learn from one another. There's also a need for us to continually develop our own skills. We can do this by learning and enrolling in courses or attending workshops and seminars. The access to professional development has never been this straightforward and inexpensive with, online platforms and attending conferences like what we are doing today at Belta. Communing together, sharing this shared passion of bringing forth change has brought so much value to what I was doing. I've met so many people who believed in me, in what I was doing years ago, and they invested their time to inspire me, to talk to me, to give me that valued motivation that I so craved. There's also a need for us to continually develop our own skills. We can do this by learning and enrolling in courses or attending workshops and seminars. The access to professional development has never been this straightforward and inexpensive with, online platforms and attending conferences like what we are doing today at Belta. Communing together, sharing this shared passion of bringing forth change has brought so much value to what I was doing. I've met so many people who believed in me, in what I was doing years ago, and they invested their time to inspire me, to talk to me, to give me that valued motivation that I so craved. In conclusion, due to unprecedented times with significantly exigent challenges the world has bestowed on teachers, the need for teachers to take up the role of a leader and innovator has never been more significant. Therefore, we must not be complacent, but we must continually strive to learn with and from each other and innovate through empowerment to ensure that our students fulfill and achieve their vast potential. With that, I thank you.
Very much for that compelling talk. Our next speaker is Eduardo from Indonesia, represented from the Jogja English Teachers Association. He's an English teacher at junior high school in a rural area in Gunung Kidul, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. After his first decade as a teacher, he's still eager to discover better ways to help his students learn. With that, I present to you Eduardo with his topic, ELT in rural areas. The default mode is crisis.
Today, I am going to share with you why I think this is the case. ELT in rural area, the default mode is crisis. Problems with ELT in rural area is, first, English here is a foreign language, so we have low to zero exposure of English out of classroom setting. Students would have low motivation in learning English too because they perceive English is just another compulsory subject to pass. And I have to say the passing grade is pretty low. And they can trick this. They can join several remedial class sessions, retake the test once or twice, and eventually as a subject, they will pass English without having to acquire the language in the real sense of language acquisition. So we are learning English in acquisition for environment, where the norm is not having to acquire the language at all. Another norm is this traditional life cycle. Students perceive that they need only graduate vocational school or high school and go for the real life work options they have in industrial compound or work as hard laborers, get married and have kids. This is reflected from the fact that probably only less than 3% of the graduates from my SMP at the middle school where I teach end up studying in university level. It's probably because they can't afford university study. They know they can't afford this. They know it will never happen to them. So they might conclude that English is not important for their well-being because they might not work in those areas either. With this in mind, the pandemic hit. Of course, this picture over here is just an illustration because my students, they don't have laptops on their own. They don't have their own personal computers. They only have their smartphones as their only digital learning tool. And it's not the bleeding edge tech-equipped smartphones either. So it's been a struggle in the early onset of the pandemic when the government announced the school lockdown last year on March. In March to June 2020, I was just trying to tie loose ends. As other teachers in my school, the mode is take-home assignments. So every other week, parents had to take assignments from school, and students would spend a week working on the practice and project while consulting with their teachers via chat lines in WhatsApp group. But the new year academic year came and the pandemic wasn't over yet. So I had to to find the tool that worked best for my classroom setting. We had tried Google Classroom, Google Meet, Zoom, quizzes, chat lines, audio explanation via voice notes in WhatsApp app, but we resorted back to take-home assignments because most of my students, they couldn't complete the assignments online. That was disappointing and disheartening. But recently on January and June, I was settling down with presentation slides, using PPT slides, and audio explanation, and most importantly, individual feedback. So this on the chart is the typical learning process in my classroom, especially starting on July. On the new academic year this year, I was starting to feel hopeful because I can use Telegram as my tool to work with my students, voice chats, and there is also group voice conference. So on Mondays, my students will have the pre-recorded videos that I posted on YouTube with explanation and examples for the topic of the week. And then they can consult with me via chat lines in Telegram on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and on Thursdays. I'm going to gather up my students on a small group discussion using Telegram in a group voice conference. So this is how we look like. I'm trying to keep my students engaged. So I would group them in small groups based on their ability, their effort, and punctuality in submitting the assignments or in their responding to the practice and project from the video explanation in YouTube. So typically in my class of 20 students, I would divide them in groups of 4 or groups of 3. So I would have 5 to 7 sessions in a day, teaching and syncing up the topic that they have learned individually during the first 3 days in the week on Thursdays via Telegram group voice chat. By keeping the group small, I believe that I can reach them individually, and then if needed, I would give more individualized and personalized feedback via voice note or chat lines to their personal number. This was by far, at least according to Lee, is very basic and rudimentary use of technology to make sure online learning going. But this is the point. You don't have to use the most advanced, the most sophisticated use of tools of digital tool to make sure learning happen. You use what works for your classroom setting. And fortunately, the government here starting last September announced that we can have a face-to-face meeting, albeit limited. So we only have 60 minutes a week on a face-to-face meeting with our students so that I can have the opportunity to sync up what they have learned before class begins. So it's a flipped classroom setting with limited face-to-face meeting. With that in mind, I have some points to ponder. That technology is a tool. So you create the solution. In my case, I had to figure out which tool worked best, which is the most suitable tool, not the most advanced, not the latest, but the most suitable to my setting, because even when I had to read on SITREPs, digital learning landscape analysis in Indonesia, and how we can have learning from home during pandemic, in the end, my situation is unique to you and to your student. Because finally, what we have to keep in mind is that we want to keep our student engaged. That's the main concern. Because lest we forget, the center of educational process is the human relationship between a student and a teacher. You might think that it's between you and your class, but essentially, it's between you and a student, singular. So the rapport, the relationship between you and one student, each and every student in your classroom, is the main concern of educational process. That way you can make sure your students are engaged, actively seeking ways of connecting, associating together the various components of learning. This can be done if you know your students in person, in small groups, in personalized, individualized, differentiated, immediate feedback that you give to your student. We're back at this notion that the default mode is crisis. Probably I have solved the crisis of building relationship with my students, because after 3 months of not meeting me, or more than 3 months for the 8 and 9 graders, when they finally had the chance to meet in person in face-to-face meeting setting, they are not too shy, they're not reluctant to express themselves, to show that they have learned the things they should learn during the studying from home, learning from home setting. That crisis may seem over, but the pandemic may be over soon. Let's hope for that. And then everything would go normal. But is the crisis over? I sure hope not. I would like to think that it would be better for us teachers if anywhere in the world the default mode should be crisis. Because the moment we think we have no problem with our learning process, the moment we think there is no problem with our students, there's no problem with the way we teach, that's the end of progress. So by keeping at constant awareness that we are in a crisis, we would seek solutions. We would seek better ways. We would adapt a more flexible, personalized learning for our students. We can have more possibilities. And when we collaborate with other teachers, we will have ample choices. We have plethora of learning strategies to be practiced in our own setting. Only on the brink that people find the will to change. Only at the precipice do we evolve. If we think we are safe, if we think we are okay, everything is fine, we're not going anywhere. So by this, I would like to propose that the default mode is crisis, not just in rural area, but anywhere in the world. We have to be at constant awareness that we're in trouble. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Miriam Esther Puente Rodriguez. She is from Primaria Vecina Lena Vicario, Mexico. She is an elementary school teacher for PRONI, is Programa Nacional de Inglés, is the National English Program in the border city of Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. She believes playfulness and creativity are vital for students' development. Then I pass the mic to her with her topic, building a bridge, not a wall. The first
Hello
classroom.
and welcome to Building a Bridge, Not a Wall. Well, hello and welcome to Building a Bridge, Not a Wall, the diverse classroom. Let me introduce myself. My name is Miriam Puente. I am from Mexico. I'm an elementary school English teacher for PRONI, Programa Nacional de Inglés. And I've been an external expert advisor for English language teaching since September of 2019. So, what is PRONI? PRONI is the National English Program. It's been around since 2016 and it aims to strengthen the process of teaching and learning English as a foreign language in Mexican public schools. Not all schools have PRONI, which is quite ironic, particularly here in the city of Tijuana. Every day, the border city of Tijuana receives repatriations and deportations from the United States, an incoming flux of migrant caravans from Central and South America as well as from the Caribbean, connational populations displaced by the drug wars, especially from the Mexican states of Michoacán and Guerrero. And we also have our daily transborder commuters, which are people that cross back and forth between Mexico and the United States. Just to have a sense of geographical location, let's go all the way to Mexico. Mexico shares a border with the United States, and on the northernmost part of Mexico, we can find Tijuana. It is in Tijuana where the border wall that divides both countries starts. It's both a physical and a symbolic barrier. Tijuana is a dynamic and industrial border city. And this is where the Mexico US border wall begins. But this wall is not continuous. It has three ports of entry into the city of Tijuana, and the main one of these ports of entry is the San Isidro port of entry. According to the Smart Border Coalition, there are 300,000 border crossings per day. This is the context where my little school, Leona Vicario, is. So, this is my school, the Leona Vicario Primary School. We stopped having face-to-face classes on March 16. In order to resume classes during the COVID pandemic, the Mexican government took the initiative to create Aprende en Casa, which means learn from home. The Aprende en Casa videos were 30 minutes long, so I didn't want my students to spend all their data on those classes. So I started designing shorter lessons. I started using Canva for the graphic design, but for the video and the voice recording, I was using this wonderful app that is called Spark, Adobe Spark. You don't even have to pay a penny for it. I was leaning a lot towards the textbook because I was trying to emulate that feeling of being next to my students. Despite me providing these resources, there was a sort of Matthew effect going on, which means the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It was this kind of aha moment. I remember the situation I had with one of my students. I graded him with a 90. And just to let you know, most English teachers, we share Google Classroom with the Spanish teacher. The Spanish teacher for that group was teacher Janet Montes. She's such a rock star. And I remember she called me and was like, oh my God, it's this teacher Janet. And she just told me, hey Miriam, I know that you gave this student a 90, but you know, he has these issues. He's been improving a lot. His family is going through a lot, the pandemic, and you should consider the grading. It was the first time that I asked myself, am I building a bridge or a wall for my students? Am I being a barrier, or am I actually reaching and sadly, I think I could say at that moment I was becoming a wall. So that was the moment I start thinking about the way I was doing my teaching practice. Yeah, in the end, I ended up giving that student 100% because yes, he had improved a lot. And that's when I reached wall number one, the wall of inflexibility. I was expecting my students to do the same level of schoolwork as for COVID-19. That was without considering that they have unstable internet access and connection, that they share digital devices with other family members, either parents or siblings, that there were conflicting school work schedules between the children and the parents, and let's not forget the distractions at home, the pet jumping in front of the computer. We've seen a lot during the pandemic, so we all have all kind of distractions at home. And also some students were suffering of problems with housing because they didn't even have the space to live, let alone to connect to an internet class. And that was when I reached this wall, I noticed that there was a need for very simple and accessible lessons for a wide variety of students with different devices, schedules, and resources. Because of the pandemic, probably the last thing on my children's mind was English homework. I started applying micro-learning, that is delivering lessons in small chunks. And also because I have the problem of some students who were not able to connect because the parents were not there with them, I started creating 2 to 6 minute videos. I learned how to build bridge number one, the bridge of trial and error. So if I want to know if something is working or not, I just ask the children. They can tell us a lot about how they feel in the pandemic, what they're going through when they're doing creative endeavors. We should always treasure that, because otherwise we are building the wall number two, the wall of explanation, when we are being very adult-centric and we don't take the children's point of view into account. Behind this wall, there's a need for a safe space for students to share and participate. It's just as a teacher to be playful. Sometimes we forget to be playful and children learn through playing. So try to think out of the box and do the unexpected. You always get a good laugh with your students. This always works with my students. So if they cannot draw something, tell them to put the drawing upside down, because it's actually easier to copy. There's some science behind it. For practicing pronunciation, you tell them to do syllable by syllable of the word, but you do it backward. Something that they love is TPR, total physical response. And something I started applying on my second year of the pandemic was to give my students options to turn in their homework. And that was something I stumbled upon by accident, because we didn't have any textbooks, so I had to manage something. So I gave my students options to turn in their homework. We have option A, which is audio and video. Option B is the old-fashioned notebook, just writing or illustrations. And they have option C, which was a creative project. So for option A, audio and video, I will tell them to take care of their privacy, because we don't know who's lurking on the internet. And I also have option B, which is normally what we do on the online class, just all writing and illustration, some text. They will have different interpretations of the same theme. This is a text about corn, but they all did different illustrations. And then we have option C, a creative project. Some of them actually got really carried away. I have this emerged visual narrative of a third grader about prohibition signs. It's something about no smoking. So it's quite. I actually got surprised by this one. It made me laugh. Why it's so bad to smoke? And yeah, he got really carried away. I was only asking for 4 signs, and he did this whole narrative. And he finished with the end, but in Spanish. So I didn't even correct this one. Just like that, I arrived to bridge number 2, the bridge of inventiveness and playfulness. Remember, be playful. Think out of the box. Do the unexpected. Do a storytelling. It's a lot of fun. And do immersive stories with social practice. use TPR, total physical response. First graders live for it, I can tell you. And let your students vote and choose what they want to learn. That empowers them. And also give your students options to turn into their homework. They will be surprising you. At some point or another, we all hit wall number 3, the wall of isolation. Maybe because we were suffering from emotional distress, an illness, a crisis, or we suffer a loss, or we were witness to the rise of domestic violence. But behind that wall, there's the need for human connection. So parents and guardians are very crucial, especially when we work with younger children. For example, for parents that were a little dubious about English, I created these tables. For example, on the first column I will put the text in English. On the second column I will use Spanish, and on the third one I will use a pronunciation key to help parents learn English too as well. And remember, right now, teachers are tech support and customer service too. Leave a good and lasting impression on guardians and parents as well.
Being here just proves that you're not alone. Collaborate with your fellow teachers. I can say I'm extremely lucky to be here with you, and also to have some wonderful teachers surrounding me in my school. I have younger teachers and older teachers alongside me, and there's a lot they bring to the table, and I also try to share something with them as well. So this is wonderful. We have the same or similar struggles in our own context, and this is the way we build bridge number 3, the bridge of the collective and the individuals.
If I had to choose a memory that sums up all this pandemic experience, I will have to go back to the last day of face-to-face classes. I remember having this student, this little girl, third grader, this girl, asking me for a hug. And I didn't have that many students back then. Everybody was starting to go back to their homes and not sending children to school. But she was there, and she asked me for a hug, and I told her, you know what, darling, try to keep a distance right now so I cannot hug you. And I saw the disappointment in her face. Whoa, that expression remained with me for almost 2 years. It was like a little thorn inside my heart. And even despite having all this communication through WhatsApp and through Google Classroom, and I saw her homework, I deeply regretted not hugging her in that moment. Because at the end of the day, we as teachers are creators of experiences. And all we do is contain those little moments we have with them in that connection. And I'm pretty sure I was building a wall in that moment. But just 1 month ago, when I was picking up the new textbooks, I saw her. She's now a 5th grader. She's a young lady now. And she was with her sister. Her sister is in 1st grade with me. So I was so happy to see her. We were very joyous to see ourselves. So we started singing some songs and reading from the books. And maybe against all protocols, I guess, we were able to hug because we were very, very happy to see each other again. So we were able to bump elbows too, but just knowing that she was well and alive, that was the greatest experience of all, knowing she was okay. And from my part, letting her know she was being loved. At the end of the day, that was the takeaway from this pandemic. That education is the idea of all. Education is very important, but the main component is the relationships we develop with our students, the love, the songs, the smiles, the laughter, the elbow bumps, all the experiences. And I think it's very true that what Paulo Freire said, that education does not transform the world, education changes people, and people change the world. And for students, for our little first graders, second graders, third graders, and so on, or maybe we have adult students too, for them, always build a bridge, not a wall. Always build a bridge to reach and teach, but also to share this experience that is called life.
Much for your heartfelt and personal presentation. So touching. Thank you so much, Miriam. Okay, our next presenter is from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Mexico, Thailand. Our next speaker is Assistant Professor Kombi Papunpun. She is from Kon University, Thailand. She is the head of the English Department, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Konkan University, Thailand. She is also the regional affiliate representative of Thailand. With that, I pass the mic to Professor.
Hi everyone, I'm Gami Papunpun, a representative from Thailand TESOL. Today, it is my honor to talk about online teacher training for school English language teachers in Thailand. I divided my talk into 4 parts. The first part is going to be about ELT and the COVID-19 situation in Thailand. And the second part, I will talk about online teacher training during the COVID-19 in Thailand and teachers' feedbacks on what we have done for them. And I will end my session with the practical guidelines and model for online teacher training. So first of all, in Thailand, I think it's similar to many countries. We are still facing the COVID-19. We have actually had 3 waves until now. The first wave was at the beginning of 2020, and the second wave was by the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. The third wave was from April this year until last month, actually. Even though right now we reopened the country and schools on since November the 1st with precaution measures, we are not very good at controlling the situation that much. So I think that online classes are going to be with us for quite a long time. Before talking to the online training session that we have organized for ELT teachers in Thailand, I would like to talk about teacher training programs that Thailand TESOL usually offered to teachers in Thailand. So the first program is about English proficiency enhancement for primary school teachers. This program is for primary school teachers and elementary school teachers in Thailand. And usually these teachers do not hold a degree in TESOL or English or relevant fields. So we would like to help them improve or enhance their English language skills. We usually offer seats for 200 to 300 teachers in Thailand each year. The second program is called Reload Grantees. This program is for school teachers at all levels. In each year, we have 40 scholarships for teachers across country for them to enhance both their language proficiency and professional development by attending Thailand TESOL conference. And before being able to attend the conference, they have to attend the preparation courses, which we help them improve their communication skills. And we also offer them follow-up sessions after the conference so that they can, practice writing or giving presentations about what they have listened from the Thailand TESOL conference. So the programs that we usually offer, we have to cancel the programs due to the COVID-19 situation. So at the meeting, we talked about the ways that we can help the teachers, train the teachers instead of those 2 programs, what we can do for them during the COVID-19. And we kind of think that since we know that they are struggling with using technology in ELT, plus we use the results from the research on teachers' professional needs that I conducted last year, together with the needs that we have observed in the ELT in Thailand and the results from the questionnaires from the survey that we gave to about 4,000 teachers in Thailand answer our survey. And we know their needs in terms of content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, technological knowledge as well. And we use the results from the questionnaire to help us guide the training courses for ELT teachers. So we have learned that from the results, we've learned that they would like to improve their pedagogical development in terms of creative material development, teaching, speaking, or game-based learning approach. And for technological part, they would like to use new technology or application in their classroom. Well, this is quite a good time for, the COVID-19 situation. So in the meeting, we agreed that the theme should be using technology for ELT. Why do we have the theme? Because in Thailand, apart from Thailand TESOL Committee, we also have regional affiliates, which we have 9 regional affiliates. So we came up with a theme using technology in ELT, and then we proposed the theme to 9 regional affiliates and asked them to create any topics of teacher training relevant to technology in ELT. So 9 regional affiliates, in central part of Thailand, in the upper north, lower north, upper northeast, lower northeast, upper south, lower south, east, and west. They came up with very interesting topics for online teacher training. For example, using interactive worksheets for ELT online classrooms, using online application like quizzes and Padlet to create activities in English classrooms, using online games for English language teaching, PowerPoint slides, interactive PowerPoints, Canva and KineMaster applications, and Flipgrid to enhance speaking skills of the students. So in total, there are about 2,000 teachers attended the workshops in 9 regions in total. And each workshop has different numbers of hours. Like the minimum is 3 hours and the maximum is 12 hours. And these are posters that each region used to promote their workshops and recruit participants. The first workshop was launched in May 2021, and then until now, we still have the workshop for them. And this is the pictures that we have taken. Actually, there are more pictures, but I just want to show you the atmosphere of online training. All right. After every session, we give them questionnaire to evaluate the workshop. And these are the teachers' feedback. Teacher satisfaction, they're quite happy with the training workshops. The mean score is very high, ranging from 4.5 to 4.8, and the maximum is 5 scores. So they're quite happy with it. They're super satisfied with the workshops. Qualitative data showing that, they said training topics are very useful, very practical for them, and they can apply what they have learned in their classrooms. They think that trainers and speakers are knowledgeable and have techniques to convey the knowledge and to guide them step by step in order to use applications or can create online activities successfully. Apart from that, they said that workshop facilitators are very helpful, because we don't really only have speakers and trainers, since we have the workshops and we have breakout rooms for them to practice. So in each room, facilitators are going to help them with everything that they need in terms of, learning how to use application or create something online. And they said training duration 3 hours are too short for them, and 12 hours are too long. So they preferred maybe 1 hour, 1 day, like 6 hours are quite appropriate for them. In terms of advertisement and communication, we advertise the posters or the workshops in the TESOL organization web page, and also the TESOL affiliates web page, and they think that is appropriate and it's very convenient for them to access the information. We also have like groups to communicate and to send them some news regarding the workshops, and they're happy with that. They believe that online training format is convenient for them, even though they said they're not familiar with it and they don't like using technology, especially senior teachers. They said that online training is still convenient for them because they can learn any place, anytime. You don't have to pay for transportation or hotels. And they need more workshops or webinars, actually, and it should be online too. They also gave suggestions about topics, interesting topics that they would like to attend in the future. For example, they would like to learn more about ELT applications or online games. They love fun. They would like to use games in their classroom. They'd like to learn how to design and create interactive online activities. Global Englishes in ELT, creating ELT video clips, teaching phonics pronunciation, speaking, preparing teachers for CFR-based tests, online language testing and assessment, and action research. And we have thought about that, and we kind of agree that maybe in the future we'll consider these kind of topics for our online training sessions. Lessons that Thailand TESOL have learned from these online training workshops. First, we learned that training on using technology for ELT is in high demand. Still, they need workshops on how to use more applications or more online games in their classrooms. Teachers have high motivation to join the professional development sessions. For sure, we can observe from their interaction and the feedbacks from the questionnaire. Online training helps build a stronger network among ELT teachers, not only among ELT teachers, but between ELT teachers and Thailand TESOL organizations as well. We can recruit more members from those workshops. Online training increases teachers' confidence in using technology for ELT purposes. Effective online platforms include Zoom for virtual training and Facebook Live simultaneously. Effective communication channels are FB groups and Line groups. And online teacher training is needed. And in the future, we plan to offer more online training sessions for them. So I would like to conclude by this slide. From what we have done, we think that this teacher training model during the COVID-19 is very successful in Thailand because we started from their professional development needs. We know their needs, and we organized training courses or workshops for them that meet their needs. We planned, and then we implemented what we have planned through 9 regional affiliates, and this is very successful. We evaluated each workshop, and we used the evaluation, inclusive evaluation, as a data or information to inform our next series of online training. And this is very successful. This is what we are really proud of during the COVID-19. And this is what we would like to share with you, the online teacher training during the COVID-19 by Thailand TESOL Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kondipa. Now we will move on to the question and answer session. Hi there. Hi, Sam. Hi, Miriam. And hi, Dr. Kwangwipa. Okay, we are really pressed for time, so I will ask one golden question to all of you. Okay. The scale of learning loss due to the pandemic cannot be understated at all. Okay, quoting Dr. Kamash from yesterday, it is imperative to focus on the students that are there and not stress out about factors that are out of our control. Now, our panelist is made up of educators and teacher trainers. So, I would like you to share one key area for educators to focus on to maintain engagement and motivation. And we also have Michelle's question, key areas to focus on to maintain student motivation and engagement. So, could I ask Dara, could you answer first?
Sure. Can everyone hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear your voice.
So in the long run, I have to, if you have my students' characteristics, we need to focus our effort to, in the long run, uh, can anyone hear my voice? I'm sorry with the
We can
technical
hear your
problem.
voice. You're very clear.
Okay, in the long run, if you have my students' characteristics, I think we need to focus our effort to open their eyes to richer future possibilities that they don't have to take the traditional path their predecessors have always been taking. That engage is one of the keys to opening these possibilities. And on a more practical level, immediate, personalized, differentiated, meaningful I think I have to keep exploring new ways myself to provide this kind of feedback because I believe keeping students engaged means keeping them believing that their needs are gathered and that their unique problems are the teacher's concern. Basically, echoing what Sam and Dr. Jonathan Newton's keynote, working towards humanizing English instruction. I think that's my answer for the question.
Thank you so much, Dara. Next, I would like to ask Miriam. Would you like to answer?
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So in my case, I think I will. Actually, it was interesting that we had very similar experiences. But what I found to be good when trying to recover some of my missing in action students, it was to reaching agreements with parents. Maybe that only works for younger students, but reaching agreement with them, and also um, just like some just have them participate as well in choosing the topics they are going to study. If they have to have some game they yes, some skin on the game, so it's good for them to give them an opportunity to participate so they think they can have um, so an obligation as well, a right and an obligation. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Yes, I love it. I love how Dara is talking about humanizing the education and making sure the students' needs are prioritized. And Miriam is saying that we should give more ownership for students and give them more choices in the activities. Next, I'd like to pass the question to Dr. Conwipa. Would you like to answer from the perspective of a teacher trainer, maybe? Dr. Conwipa, can you hear us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So actually from myself as a teacher in a higher education, with them.
I think we have lost Dr. Konwipa. We can't get her. Um, Due to technical issues, perhaps we could pass the question to. Okay, we have lost Dr. Konwipa. Sadly, this is another example of learning lost during the pandemic. We have a speaker lost in the pandemic. Okay, we will pass the question to Sam. Please take the question.
Right. Yeah. First of all, I agree very much with Dr. Dira and Miriam with their answers earlier on. I think they were fantastic and spot on. If I could add on anything, it would be like how much are we involving our students in our decision making? Because eventually, it's not what we do for them; it's about what we do with them. So I think that's what matters the most. And I think if we can create that culture, it creates a sense of belonging in the classroom, and it eventually creates sustainability, engagement, motivation, because they are part of the process, they are part of the execution, they're part of the learning is theirs. So yeah, I think that would be my answer.
Yes. Thank you so much to everyone. I think this is a wonderful panel because we have a lot of grassroots personal sharing from every single one. It's lovely to see all of you, and I'm sure a lot of teachers are excited to see this panel. And we're always happy to see teachers and educators sharing so much. And it's been a great energy. And unfortunately, Dr. Kwon is not able to join us again. But I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our wonderful speakers. Thank you for joining this. And with that, I would end the session.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Presenters Showcase of IELTSCon 2021. It's 11 a.m. here in Penang, Malaysia. So a very good morning to you. And if you're not in our time zone, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Denise Hua, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you 4 special presenters who have been selected to share their views on different aspects of ELT that can impact the teaching and learning of English today and tomorrow. Without wasting any time, let me introduce our first presenter, Professor Neil J. Anderson from the United States. Neil is Professor Emeritus of English Language Teaching and Learning at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. His research interests include second language reading, language learner strategies, and learner self-assessment. In this presentation, Neil will share with us why he believes it is necessary to build reading skills from the bottom up. Over to you, Neil.
Hello, and welcome to this conference presentation entitled Building Reading Skills from the Bottom Up. I want to acknowledge that I have a collaborator for this session, Aisara Otarova. As we focus our attention during this conference presentation on building strong bottom-up reading skills, I want to extend a challenge to you that you will take one idea from this presentation that you will explore in more detail and implement one small change in your teaching so that you can assist your students in building stronger reading skills. As we focus on the development of stronger bottom-up reading skills, I simply want to also remind you that building those bottom-up skills is simply one part of a larger curriculum for reading instruction. This slide illustrates some of the components that might be present in a strong reading curriculum. When reading is the focal skill that you are trying to help students develop greater depth in, you want to make sure that there are appropriate opportunities for grammar learning and vocabulary learning within the reading curriculum. You also want to make sure that there are meaningful and appropriate opportunities to integrate reading with writing, speaking, and listening. And a well-developed reading curriculum will also take advantage of technology to make sure that in appropriate ways you're using technology to help students develop depth in their ability to be efficient and effective readers. We want to remember that during reading instruction, comprehension should be our goal, that we're trying to help students develop their abilities to comprehend what they're reading and to then be able to use what they're reading in meaningful and positive ways. As we develop depth in reading, there are 2 primary components that typically exist in a reading curriculum. There is intensive reading instruction. This is the part of the curriculum that happens during class. And there's extensive reading instruction. This is the part of the curriculum that should focus on what students do outside of reading, the classroom. During intensive reading instruction, there are many, many aspects that could be focused, the focal point for intensive reading instruction. It could be the bottom-up skills of phonological instruction or vocabulary instruction or strategic reading or reading fluency. These are just 4 examples of elements that could be part of your intensive reading instruction. During extensive reading instruction, this is, as I mentioned, this is what the students would be doing outside of class, we want to provide students with a well-balanced opportunity to read both narrative and expository texts so that they can practice outside of class the comprehension building skills that we are giving them during intensive reading instruction. A balanced approach to effective reading instruction is going to include both top-down and bottom-up processes as part of the curriculum. Examples of common top-down processes would be building students' metacognitive knowledge, strategic knowledge, world knowledge, background knowledge, and their literacy knowledge. All of these elements of our top-down processes and are often very well developed in textbooks and in reading curriculum, that students have opportunities to learn how to use these top-down processes to be effective readers. The bottom-up processes, which are often overlooked in a reading curriculum, include phonemic awareness, sound blending knowledge, sound symbol knowledge, decoding skills, and sight word recognition. I want to highlight that it is these bottom-up processes that are often ignored during reading instruction. There is a need for explicit bottom-up reading instruction. Eske in 1988 pointed out, and this is over 30 years ago, that, quote, despite the emergence of interactive models, he was concerned that much of the second language reading literature exhibited a strongly top-down bias. Not much has changed in the 30 years since Eske made this declaration. We still are a very top-down heavy process in textbooks that teach reading and in-class reading instruction. The bottom-up processes are often overlooked or underutilized as part of a reading curriculum. Lee and D'Angelo in 2016 emphasize that efficient lower-level skills are also needed for reading comprehension. We cannot forget those lower-level skills, those bottom-up processes. They play an essential role in the comprehension process. And in a conversation that I had with a colleague in 2020, he emphasized that phonics instruction is imperative for some and beneficial for all. That statement highlights that some of our learners will absolutely need phonics instruction in order to automatize the bottom-up processes that are essential for reading comprehension. But all students will benefit from phonics instruction, even if they already have some strong bottom-up skills. Here are possible classroom activities that you can use to help build bottom-up reading instruction and be more explicit in your approach in strengthening those bottom-up skills. You can play the rhyming game. Give your students a focal word and then have them generate as many words as possible that rhyme with your focal word. You can also do activities that match letters and sounds. So you could give the students a worksheet with letters, and then you could give the students one of the sounds of the English language and have them then identify which letter corresponds with the sound that you have given them. You can also practice activities where you're sequencing sounds and letters. There's one activity that I have used with what is called Elkonen boxes. They're simply boxes on the worksheet, and you provide the students with letters from the English alphabet, and then you say a sequence of sounds, and the students take the letter that represents that sound and puts it in one of the boxes on the worksheet in order to demonstrate that they know how to sequence the sounds that you have given them with the letters that correspond to those sounds. You can also prepare activities that are called rapid shape recognition, rapid letter recognition, and rapid word recognition. In these three types of bottom-up activities in the classroom, you will give the students a shape, a letter, or a word, and then on the worksheet, you will provide them with distractors and the matching shape, letter, or word. And the student's task is to simply look at the target shape, letter, or word, and then look at the options that are available on the worksheet and put a line through the matching shape, letter, or word. With the rapid shape, letter, or word activities, you want to impose an appropriate time limit for the students so that they're not just working through the activity at a casual pace, but they are being timed in order to work through the activity so that they are automatically and efficiently recognizing those shapes, letters, and words in order to then use that automaticity as they move into more top-down activities to strengthen their reading ability. I want to highlight that one other conference presentation at this conference is by my colleague, Aisara Otorova. The title of her presentation is A Systematic Approach to Phonics Instruction. Aisara is going to go into more detail into some of the things that could be done in a classroom where you're focusing on phonics instruction with a systematic approach. As I close, let me just remind you of the challenges that I gave you at the beginning of this presentation. I've challenged you to ask yourself now, what is one idea that you will take from this presentation that you will explore in more detail? For example, you might want to do some more exploration of how to use the sound symbol recognition activity, or the rapid shape, or the rapid letter, or the rapid word activity. Explore in more detail one of those activities, and then implement one small change in your classroom instruction so that you can help students develop strong bottom-up reading skills. I look forward to interacting with you during the conference offline as you have an opportunity to watch this presentation, and I'm open to exploring any questions that you have. You could send me an email or contact me through the YouTube channel when you watch this presentation as part of the conference. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the very best in building reading skills from the bottom up.
Thank you, Professor Anderson. I like your challenge. And I'm sure our viewers have taken up your challenge and will leave this session with at least one idea from you, which they will try to implement in their reading lessons in order to develop a stronger foundation in reading, as you say, from the bottom up. Ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is Indrani Liu from Veritas Edu Consultancy in Malaysia. Indrani has been teaching for 31 years in Malaysia and England. She enjoys teaching English from the early years to tertiary level. She's a passionate constructivist educator who also conducts teacher training. Today, Indrani is going to share with us how she fully exploited a book. And in this presentation, let us listen and watch how she achieves the goal. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Indrani Liu with a presentation, How I Am Malala Impacted Adolescent Conscience and Developed Contemporary Values.
I Am Malala was a book that I chose to study with my year 10 and 11 students who are pursuing IGCSE First Language English. I wanted a book that will open their eyes to what's happening around in the world, contemporary events. And I also wanted them to consider and think about beliefs and values. And now I would like to share how I Am Malala profoundly impacts adolescent conscience and develops contemporary values. Reading I Am Malala opened my students' eyes to culture and values in other countries. It also opened their eyes to universal human rights. They were surprised and actually taken aback by the very austere quality of life, as well as harsh beliefs in some less economically developed countries. And they also discussed the juxtaposition of religion and modern life in specific nations in our contemporary world. They also evaluated their beliefs and values. All I want is an education, and I am afraid of no one. Who is Malala, who can make such a strong statement? Malala was born in Mingora in the Swat Valley in northern Pakistan in 1997. Now, the Swat Valley is very conservative and only boys are celebrated. Okay? Baby girls' arrival will actually cause relatives to commiserate with the father. Daughters are not allowed to be seen. If there are visitors, they will have to remain hidden behind a curtain. The girl's duty is to serve the family, especially with food, and also to have children when they get married. Malala's father fell in love with his daughter at first sight, and he did something different. He celebrated a daughter's birth. He sensed there was something different about the baby, and he named her Malala after a Pashtun heroine, Malalai. And he, decided that Malala will be as free as a bird. He didn't want to have any restrictions. Now, Ziauddin Yousafzai overcame a speech impediment. He was a teacher and established his own school. He was a very passionate social activist, and he had received threats from the Taliban. Malala was the apple of her father's eye, even though she had two younger brothers, and she loved listening to stories of their tribes from her father. And Ziauddin was Malala's role model. In 2007, the Swat Valley was invaded by the Pakistani Taliban, who imposed strict Islamic law. They destroyed or shut down girls' schools. They banned women from leaving home unless accompanied by a relative, and they executed entertainers who performed what so-called un-Islamic songs and dances. But Malala says, my father says that education is now neither Eastern nor Western. Education is education. It's the right of everyone. And I said to myself, Malala, you must be brave. You must not be afraid of anyone. You're only trying to get an education. You are not committing a crime. Very powerful words. How dare the Taliban take away my basic right to education was Malala's first speech, which she gave on September 1st, 2008. At the time, she was 11 years old. Her speech was publicized throughout Pakistan. Then Malala began writing a regular blog for BBC Urdu about her daily life using Gul Makai as a pseudonym. Some of her entries were translated into English. Then the Taliban announced that all girls' schools will be shut down on January 15, 2009. And more than 100 of these schools were bombed. In February, Malala made her first television appearance on a Pakistani current events talk show, and the New York Times released 2 documentaries about Malala, Class Dismissed and A Schoolgirl's Odyssey. This means that she became more and more famous. And, all right, the Taliban were watching. When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. The other people in the Pashtun Valley kept quiet because they were afraid to incur the wrath of the Taliban. On October 9, Malala was shot in the head by a Pakistani Taliban gunman on the way home from school. And the Pakistani Taliban actually announced that they had attempted to kill her. She survived the attack and was flown to Birmingham for treatment. Here is a headline: 14-year-old activist shot and critically wounded. Taliban threatened to attack again if Malala survives. Malala Yousafzai at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. She was flown to UK. And Malala, the girl who was shot for going to school. The picture is the school bus she was in. There's the blood there. Now, obviously, from the newspaper headlines, Malala's attempted murder shocked the world, and world leaders strongly condemned the Pakistani Taliban. She paid a terrible price, but the price she paid may have awoken the world in a way that nothing else has. And that is true. This comic here shows very clearly, all right, what the Taliban had decided, why the Taliban had decided to kill her. When they saw Malala campaigning for girls' right to education, okay, they saw a terrorist. They did not see a 14-year-old girl. Right? And that is why they shot her. Some people call me the girl who was shot by the Taliban, and some the girl who fought for her rights. And both are true. She was shot by the Taliban because she fought for her right to education. Malala recovered and stayed with her family in Birmingham, where she returned to her studies and to activism. She could not return to Pakistan. Then her first public appearance was made on July 12, 2013, on her 16th birthday, when she gave a speech at the United Nations in New York City. This is what she said. They thought, the Taliban, that the bullet would silence us, but they failed. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. So I told myself, Malala, you have already faced death. This is your second life. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, you can't move forward. So let us wage a glorious struggle against illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. Let us pick up our books and our pens They are the most important weapons. I thought that words and books and pens were more powerful than guns. And with guns, you can kill terrorists, but with education, you kill terrorism. Malala received the 2014 Nobel Peace Prize and became the youngest Nobel laureate. And she says that I tell my story not because it's unique, but because it is not. It is the story of many girls. She started the Malala Fund that supports education for all girls around the world. And what did my student learn? Her Malala's willingness to die for education, as opposed to taking education for granted. My students' attitude towards education changed, and they felt how fortunate it is that in Malaysia, all children have access to free and safe education. My students also learned to stand up for their values and beliefs, and how blessed it is to live in a peaceful country. My students did various learning activities. Firstly, they completed online quizzes after every chapter. Then they analyzed Malala's UN speech and Nobel Peace Prizes. Thirdly, in pairs, they chose 2 phrases or sentences from each chapter and explained the reason why they found those phrases special. Since I wanted the primary school students to learn about Malala, my students worked in groups to prepare 15-minute teaching sessions. The students also did some journaling, 1 entry for each letter or activity. Their most exciting activity was writing and actually emailing a letter to Malala through the Malala Fund. The students also worked on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030 and worked out which were the goals that Malala and the Malala Fund were supporting. They found 6 out of a total of 17. Malala opened my students' eyes to different cultures, values, and the concept of universal rights. They also learned that the quality of life is very different in many countries of the world. In less economically developed countries, not only were beliefs conservative, but beliefs can be very harsh in terms of especially punishment. And modern life in some countries of the world is living very uncomfortably with religious values and religious expectations. And finally, they evaluated their own beliefs and their own values, all right, in relation to Malala's experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Indrani, for sharing such a wonderful way of teaching our students very relevant soft skills in values education. There is nothing like bringing real life stories into our language classrooms and helping our students learn lessons from them. Sometimes we forget to count our blessings. And Indrani, you have shown us a great way to not only teach English, but also to teach our students to appreciate what they have more and to sympathize with those who have less. Well, our third presenter today is Ramya Subramaniam from SMK Bandar Tasik Mutiara in Malaysia. Ramya is a secondary school teacher in this school, and she has a Bachelor of Education, TESOL, from the Quarry University, Australia, and a Master's in Education, also in TESOL, from University Science Malaysia. Let us sit back and watch Ramya as she presents to us on the topic of flipped assessment.
Hi, I am Ms. Ramya Subramaniam. I'm teaching in SMK Bandar Tasik Mutiara, Penang. Today, I'm going to present about flipped assessment using AFC to empower learners in CEFR-aligned writing lesson. 21st century teaching and learning has made a major revamp in language assessment. So in the past, assessment was seen as a separate entity from teaching, and assessment used to seen as a process that happens at the end of teaching. But now, assessment has become an integral part of teaching and is seen as a partnership between learners and teachers, as learners should be given equal ownership and autonomy, especially in language teaching. So the learners are treated, ideally they should be treated as partners in their own assessment. This is in line with the Common European Framework of Reference, CEFR aligned curriculum, which we are using in Malaysia at the moment. This aims at creating autonomous language learners who are able to handle their own assessment. So from my experience, I realized there are few problems when it comes to learners assuming active role in assessment. Firstly, teachers still wield the absolute power in assessment in writing lessons. So the teachers decide on the topic, the rubric, the duration, word length, and everything related to assessment, and the students merely sit and answer the question given. There is little or no learner autonomy in writing assessments. So the learners are not given any voice or any power when it comes to assessment. They do not have a say in their own assessment. Learners are not confident to assume ownership in writing assessment, even if they are given some power or some role in their assessment. The learners often say that they do not know how to self-assess their work. They are not confident. They do not know what are the elements of a good writing. Okay, so there are two research questions underpinning this study. First, does flipped assessment improve pupils' performance in writing lesson? And secondly, how do pupils feel about managing their own assessment? So there are three objectives. The first one, to explore the possibilities of using aim, focus, check to reduce teachers' domination in writing assessment. It's like we are trying to take away some power from the teacher by using aim, focus, and check. To investigate the effectiveness of flipping the assessment to give some autonomy to learners. We do know about flipped instruction, flipped teaching. So I was thinking, why not we flip the assessment? What I mean by flipping the assessment is, it is related to role reversal, whereby instead of learners being at the receiving end, why don't they take an active role in assessment? They take the center stage and the teachers takes a step back and let the learners handle some parts of the assessment. So this is what I mean by flipping the assessment. So from the teacher being the sole dictator, the sole person in charge of assessment, we flip the role and the learners take the center stage and the teacher take a passive role when it comes to assessment, to provide some confidence to language learners to self-assess their writing. So some of the learners, they refuse to do self-assessment or peer assessment because they do not have the confidence. So probably they need a tool that not only will boost their confidence, but also help them to self-assess or do peer assessment to writing. So what is the intervention recommended? Aim, focus, check. AFC. So AFC refers to three stages during writing assessment, The first stage is aim, whereby the students pre-decide a band in CEFR writing scale. As we all know, there are 5 bands, 5 scales in CEFR writing scale. So the learners, I'm using a PT3 CEFR writing scale. So the learners pre-decide whether they want to focus on band 1 or band 2, band 3, band 4 or band 5. They can choose the band depending on the topic and depending on their confidence level. If they are confident in answering the question, they can choose a higher band. The second stage is focus, whereby the students choose the focus of the day, meaning 2 aspects that they want to be marked by the teacher. And the third one is a checklist, Did I checklist. The checklist is called Did I checklist. So Did I checklist serves the purpose of self-assessment and peer assessment. So aim means pupils pick a band from CEFR writing scale prior to their writing assessment. For example, if I tell my pupils that, okay, today we are going to write a message about giving suggestions, okay? So if the pupil is very confident about giving suggestion, the pupil will pick probably band 4, band 5. If the learner is not very confident, then probably they will choose band 1, band 2. They can choose any band that they want to achieve for that particular assessment, and the teacher will only mark the writing against the band picked by the pupil. For the focus, the pupils are allowed to choose 2 aspects of writing that will be focused of the assessment. So if they want the examiner to mark their tense mistakes and punctuation, then they will let the teacher know that, okay, today my focus is tense and punctuation. So the teacher will not mark other aspects. The teacher will ignore or downplay the mistakes that happens in other aspects, unless it's a big mistake and it need to be addressed on that day at that moment. Then the teacher will let the student know. Otherwise, the focus will be on the elements chosen by the learners. The third stage is check, where they are given a checklist with 10 statements. And these 10 statements have examples, like here, these are the statements, and here are the examples. Like, for example, one of the statement reads, did I use correct tense? So the example will be a sentence in past tense, a sentence in present tense, just to give a clear picture of the statement. And then there'll be a column for self-assessment, peer assessment. If they have done self-assessment, they will tick in that column. And then the peer assessment, friend will tick for them. For example, another statement will be like, did I use correct punctuation? So here, the examples of punctuation, so that this will guide the students. Sometimes if we ask the students to do self-assessment, to edit their work, they do not know how to edit, what to look at, where to start from. So this checklist will help them, will guide them, so that they will know what to do and how to do. So once they are done with this, then their friends will do the same will use the same checklist to do peer assessment. So the methodology I used, this is a quasi-experimental research, and I used Form 2 students, 32 Form 2 students participated in this study. And I tried this for 3 months. The instruments that I used for this study is pre-test and post-test writing task with similar questions and a questionnaire. The participants were given a pre-test. It was about giving suggestion, and the scores were recorded. And then I started trying AFC method. So I employed AFC method during every writing assessment, whenever we do school-based assessment, for 3 months. And after 3 months, a post-test, again about giving suggestion, but a different scope, was administered and the scores were recorded. After that, the participants were given a questionnaire. I adapted this questionnaire from Theo and Satapan 2020. So this questionnaire was given to study pupils' perception and attitude about flipped assessment to see whether they like being in the limelight when it comes to assessment, whether they like to take the center stage when it comes to assessment, and how confident they are when it comes to assessing their own work. So this is the result, the scores from pre-test and post-test. So I've used a paired t-test to analyze the results. So from this result, we can know that the post-test mean is higher, which means there is a significant difference between students' pre-test scores and post-test scores after the treatment. So their post-test scores actually improved after the treatment, meaning after I started using AFC method. And this is the data from the questionnaire. It revealed that the learners have a positive perception towards flipped assessment. They, for example, they like to set their own target for their own assessment. So about 100% agreed with this statement, 70% agreed and 30% strongly agreed. And then when they were asked about whether DIDI checklist helped them to identify their own mistakes, they gave positive response that it actually helped them to identify their own mistake. And when they were asked whether they feel relaxed that they do not have to worry about so many grammatical mistakes in their writing and they only need to focus on 2 aspects per writing, most of the students felt very positive about that. So, findings and recommendations. So, the findings from this study revealed that there is a significant improvement in pupils' writing performance when I flipped the assessment. And it also revealed that pupils have a very positive perception towards flipped assessment. So it is hoped that pupils are given more autonomy in writing assessment because it makes them to feel important and needed in the lesson. Pupils should be given a partnership in their own assessment because this is their own assessment. We are assessing the learner's understanding. So they should be given an important role and they should be given some voice in deciding their own assessment. Teachers should allow learners to have a say in the way they are assessed. So instead of teacher deciding everything, teachers should be willing to share some power and should actually allow the learners to have a say, at least let them choose a topic or let them choose some parts of the rubrics, let them choose length of the essay. So this will help the students to feel better about being assessed. Okay, so this is my presentation for today. Much for your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramya, for sharing a great strategy in empowering our students to take charge of their own learning. That's student agency. And now, let me introduce our final presenter in today's showcase. She's a young teacher with 4 years teaching experience. Her name is Asha Dewi Panirselvam. Asha is an English language teacher in a small rural primary school called SK Selat Baganyo on the island of Langkawi in Kedah, Malaysia. She's passionate about producing creative teaching materials and is currently conducting research on CEFR teaching practices as a postgraduate in University Science Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Asha Dewi sharing with us the experience in using digital tools for effective learning in a rural primary school.
Hello and good day, everyone. I am Teacher Asha here, and I'm really excited to meet all of you on this wonderful platform today. So let me move on to today's presentation, which is using digital toolkits for effective learning in a rural primary school. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a sharing of myself as a teacher on what are the digital toolkits that I use during the online learning. This is not a study. This is not a research. This is merely a sharing from me on the journey that I am really proud of today. All right, let's. What I see pandemic is as a blessing in disguise. I will tell you all why. I think at the end of my presentation, you maybe can understand why am I saying a pandemic is a blessing for me. You know, so I think we can move to this 5 wives and 1 husband thing, right? Yeah, this is about, I know all of you already have guessed what digital toolkits are and why digital toolkits, and who are the students, who are my students, and when it happened, and where it happened. This is something that I really want to share to all of you today, and then how digital toolkits were used in this teaching. All right. So what, to answer the question what, to answer the first question, I used Padlet and Google Jamboard and also Canva to produce materials, and also basically I used Canva to produce materials, worksheets, very colorful ones, especially as you can see my slides are also made from Canva today. And yeah, Padlet and Google Jamboard for brainstorming and writing and discussion part. So why before going into why I would like to introduce my school. Yeah, SK Selat Baganyor, Pulau Dayang Bunting, and in Langkawi. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know most of you will be thinking, what is so special about this school? I don't know, but my school is really special to me. I would say that most of you, I don't know whether, because previously I encountered a question like, what is there? Is there a school in that island? Yes, there is. There is, yeah, and I'm there. I am currently there. I'm talking from SK Selat Baganyor. Yeah, this is a school where the students are mostly from fisherman background. Their fathers are fishermen, and most of their mothers are housewife. You know, and they have very less exposure, to English and all that. So when this happened during this MCO period, only through virtual learning, and as I said just now, who are my students? They are some people that who really have non-English speaking background. When I even during the face-to-face learning, I really had a hard time for me to converse with them, to make them to talk in English, to make them to write in English, to make them to use to make them to use English. Even it is a challenging thing for me. So, but when it comes to online learning, the participation has reduced so much. They do not want to enter the class, especially these year 6 peoples. So I am going to show the journey that I did with them. So that's why I just wanted to mention that as year 6 pupils. And I think you can find some of their pictures here. They are all my little village kids here. Why I should say, why did I use digital toolkits is because I faced, of course, as other teachers, as the fellow teachers, I also faced this poor attendance and participation, very less participation from my kids. In the beginning of MCO, it was like merely a WhatsApp thing. You just send everything in the WhatsApp, and then they might reply, they might not reply. You have to go after that, and then all that things, and also sending out modules to their homes and all that. But I can feel that there was no, there was something that is missing, and I really can feel that when it's face-to-face learning, we used to jump, we used to dance, we used to do all that kind of things. But during this online learning, I find it really difficult for me to do things, and I can't really hope on this Google Meet and all the online facilities available due to this limitation in network here in my place. So what I was, when I was thinking what I can do the best for my kids is that I really need to come up with something fun and meaningful for them, and also which can promote participation during virtual learning. So that's where I used these colorful materials and worksheets from Canva, and I also used Padlet and Google Jamboard as alternative platform for discussion and writing. All right, this Canva, using this, starting to use this Canva has made me a really a creative teacher. I would really say I really basically, I transfer all the notes, all the worksheets, whatever I want to give, I transfer that into a module in Canva, and then make it as a module and then send it to them in a digital copy. And also worksheets, mostly since I am staying here, and my kids are mostly from this village around the school. I had the opportunity to print and keep it in my guardhouse, and then they will go and take it. That's how it started. When I didn't even introduce this Padlet and Google Jamboard first, what I did is that I printed out these materials and then send them in. And then when they see it, they feel something happening in teacher Asha's class. I really want to go. And then I really need to hook them up. And then I just call them, okay, today we are going to do this. Today we are going to do this in my WhatsApp group. And then slowly I can see the changes. I can see that they really want to come to my class. They really want to see what's happening in English class. I want to come and see. So as you can see, I've shared some pictures here also. Day by day, the attendance and also the participation has increased. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be, my kids want to be acknowledged, and they want to be addressed. They feel that this online learning provided them a chance or opportunity which didn't happen back in school. Some of them we might address, some of them we might not address, but here everything is there. When there's your name, you just go and write up everything. Your teacher is definitely going to read it. Your teacher is going to say, oh, wow, nice, you did that, good job, and all that. So they really liked it. I can really see the changes. Right. I think I have said a lot about this outcome from my students. Later, I'll be sharing some of the pictures on how ladies and gentlemen, from heart to heart, I would really like to say that this is something that I really want to treasure throughout my working, throughout my life, I would say, because my kids are not the same. I feel that they really have hard time, to find connection and all that. But when things are being interesting, things are being the way they wanted, and they feel that they are appreciated in the classroom, they really want to enjoy, they really want to come to the class, and I can see the difference. I feel that I have done something good for them, which I might not do when I'm teaching in face to face. I feel like I have given an opportunity for them to explore this technology, to explore this digital world outside. Now I can proudly say that all my kids in this class, they are a tech savvy. They can do things in a digital platform alone. I am really proud, and I am even more proud when I want to say that they can do this in English. They really want to, they have really improved. I think this is something really, really proud of, and why I came forward to present this in this conference is that I really want all the fellow teachers from the rest of the world, or Malaysia especially, to come forth and share what really your journey in throughout this pandemic. How did you manage your kids? How did you pull out things together? How did you make the online learning fun and meaningful? I think when all these things are being documented, it'll be easier. It'll be something that we want to refer to, and that's why I think this is my And I'm taking this opportunity to tell all of you, those who have joined today's conference, to see what have I done, what my pupils learn from this pandemic. I think this is something really need to be told to everyone, and I'm really thankful for that, especially. And then moving on to the second, something that really I want to treasure throughout my life is that you remember I was talking about these materials and worksheets. Yeah, I shared them in a Facebook page, in a Facebook page with the parents and teachers, and I received a very positive feedback and comments from all of them. It can be teachers and it can be also parents. They were really appreciative. They really liked my material, and it made me, it was a booster to me to do more, to publish more, to come up with things, to come up with more worksheets, and to share it with the rest of the teachers out there. So yeah, without further ado, let me show you all the photos. Yeah, we will move on to the photos now. All right, this is the Padlet that I've created during, to throughout the lesson. They will be having this name under them, and then they can start posting. So I can really see the difference. I really am proud of, back in face-to-face learning, there are people that they really do not want to come forward and talk. They really do not want to come and show their work. But now I can see the difference. But now they really want to show, teacher, I've done this. Teacher, can you see my work and all that? So I feel this is a wonderful journey. You see, all this done by my kids, and I'm really proud that I can say this to all of you. Yes, if there is, there is a mistake, that there are grammatical errors, but I think, the participation, the interest they have to come forward and write down something is already good enough for me. And yeah, I also want to share, as I was telling from just now, the feel of being appreciated and acknowledged by the teacher. They are really happy about it. When I send out this stickers and all that, they're really happy. They really want more, something like that. These are some of my materials which I did using Canva. You can see, yes, I've been sharing this to my kids and also to the teachers. So yeah, this is something that I am really proud of today. And as you can see, all these comments, all these messages, these are the things that are which help me to keep moving forward. Most of them wanted to use it in their classroom, and the parents want to print them out. And this compliments make me to be really happy. Okay, yeah, I think that's all from me today. And I really want to say to all of you that I really want to continue this after when we meet the kids in face-to-face learning also. Why I want to do this is that I want to expose them to this digitalized world. I want them to be tech savvy, and also I want them especially tech savvy, and also in to be in a to be competitive in this globalized world. Of course, they need to use English. So I think they have embarked in that journey. They have started their journey, and I'm really happy that this pandemic made us to do so. The use of digital tools in education is, I think, is really essential as of now, and not only during this pandemic. After this, it is going to be really, really important for us, as the demand for the digitalized world is increasing, and we as teachers should embrace the paradigm shift, should embrace the change, and make use of whatever tools, whatever materials outside there, and bring it to the classroom, and use it well in the classroom to the pupils, and to make their learning a better one, a fun one, and with that, I would like to say thank you so much for listening all the while. I am really looking forward for all your feedback, comments, and also questions. And I really, as I said just now, I really I am making an humble request to all the educators out there, come and show us, come and share with all of the fellow educators that what have you done during this pandemic. Thank you so much. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you, Asha. That was an inspiring presentation. Despite the difficulties you face in this pandemic, you have shown us that teaching and learning can still go on. In fact, you have created even more opportunities for your students to learn new skills, skills that are relevant for the future. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen the 4 presentations by our 4 specially showcase presenters. And in summary, we can see that the role of English language teachers today involves not just developing the foundation skills. Yes, foundation skills are important, but it also involves developing new skills such as digital skills and emphasizing soft skills and values. In short, we mustn't let go of what is core in English language teaching, but we must also not be afraid to embrace what is new. That is the way forward. Thank you for attending this session. We will take a break from live streaming now. Please come back at 2 p.m. for the final keynote of this conference by Dr. Gabriela Kleklova, the president of TESOL International Association. Presenters, it is now your coffee breakout time. Please refer to your emails and go to coffee breakouts to meet other presenters. Thank you, everyone, and see you again in 2 hours' time.